Shall I wait? I'll wait until, okay, looks like we're live now.
I think so. Yes, we're live now.
Okay, well, it's 7 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 13th of January. Good evening to all of you. I'd like to welcome you to this extraordinary council meeting, which of course is being held as a virtual meeting on Zoom. And I also welcome anybody watching the live webcast on the East Herts District YouTube channel. The local authorities and police and crime panels coronavirus flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England and Wales, regulations 2020, came into force on Saturday, the 4th of April 2020, to enable councils to hold remote committee meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic period. This was to ensure local authorities could conduct business during this current public health emergency. This extraordinary council meeting is being held remotely under these regulations via the Zoom application and is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. Regarding how we'll be voting for items on which we would normally, of course, take a show of hands, the technology enables use of the green tick or the red cross to signify voting for or against, respectively. To signify abstention from a vote, members will need to use the blue raised hand. As these indicators are only visible to the attendees at this meeting for the benefit of the public, I will then state whether an item is carried or not. If any members are participating by telephone, they'll need to speak to say how they vote. Can I just check if there are any members using just the telephone tonight? Can you just speak now?
I don't think there is, Chairman.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you. Regarding speaking, members please use the raised blue hand to indicate that you wish to speak. And if you have been, well, there's nobody on the phone, so it's not an issue. And if you are speaking, of course, unmute yourself and then speak. In terms of the now, sorry.
Chairman, may I just interrupt?
Yes.
Just for clarity for all members, some of us have a yellow hand, so they're not all blue. So I wouldn't want that to impact the voting later on.
Ah, right. Okay. A yellow hand on Zoom. Okay. And does that say raise hand?
It still says raise hand, Chairman.
It's the new version, Chairman.
Okay, fine. All right. So hopefully they'll all be counted in. We'll see. Thank you very much for those of you that contributed to the Isabel Hospice appeal in December. That's appreciated. We haven't added up how much money we've got, and if you still want to contribute to that, then you can do so. Just contact Esther Piper at the email address and she'll give you the details. Don't forget, as Councillor Cutting mentioned last time, that it's East Herts District when you're actually doing it online. Can I just mention that on the 28th of January, our Holocaust Memorial Day event will be taking place. It will, of course, be taking place not in the council chamber, but on Zoom. We have an interesting speaker, John Carr, OBE. John Carr was the Labour parliamentary candidate for Hertford and Stortford back in 1983. But he's talking about his father, who escaped from the Łódź ghetto in Poland when he was just 13 years old. John will be telling us about how he managed to escape and how he eventually got to Britain. That'll be on the 28th of January, and that'll be at 6:30. So do join us. There will be an email that will go out with the Zoom details nearer the time. Item number 2, apologies for absence. Peter?
Yeah, I've had a few. I'll just bring your note up again to remember who they are. Yeah, I had apologies from Councillor Devonshire, Councillor Drake, Councillor Hollybon, Councillor Jones, Councillor Newton and Councillor Simons. And I'm just checking whether Michael McMullen was on here because I know he had problems connecting. So I don't think he is, so that's another one as well.
Who's that?
Michael McMullen. Can't see him on here at the minute, so that's another one.
Okay, well, let's do the roll call anyway, see who's here. And if you can just say, unmute yourself and just say present or here or whatever. So Peter, over to you.
Yeah. Start with yourself, Councillor Kay.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Alder.
Here.
Councillor Andrews. No. Councillor Beckett.
Here.
Councillor Bell.
Here.
Councillor Ruth Buckmaster.
Here.
Councillor Rosemary Bolton.
Present.
Councillor Boylan.
Here.
Councillor Brady.
Present.
Councillor Eric Buckmaster.
Here.
Councillor Bull. I can see him on the screen. So
Present.
yeah. Councillor Burmix.
Present.
Councillor Corp.
Present.
Councillor Crofton.
Here.
Councillor Crystal.
Here.
Councillor Curtis.
Present.
Councillor Cutting.
Present.
Councillor Deering.
Present.
Councillor Devonshire and Draker, apologies. Councillor Dumont.
I'm here.
Councillor Fernando. Councillor Fernando. No. Councillor Fregnell.
Here.
Councillor Goldspink.
Present.
Councillor Goodeve.
Here.
Councillor Hall.
Present.
Councillor Hazy.
Present.
Apology from Dan Hollybon. Councillor Huggins.
Here.
Councillor Jeff Jones, apologies. Councillor Kemp.
Present.
Councillor McAndrew.
Present.
I don't think we've got Councillor McMullen, so that's an apology. Councillor Newton's apology. And Councillor Page. Councillor Page. No. Yeah, Councillor Page is here.
Here.
Yes, he is here. Yeah. Councillor Pope.
Yeah.
Councillor Ranger. Yeah. Councillor Redfern.
Here.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Rowley.
Here.
Councillor Ruffles.
Present.
Councillor Rutland Barsby.
Present.
Councillor Snowden.
Here.
Councillor Stevenson.
Here.
Councillor Stowe.
Present.
Normal silence, apologies. Councillor Ward Booth.
Here.
Councillor Williamson.
Here.
Councillor Wilson.
Here.
Councillor Wiley.
Here.
And did I see David Andrews join a short while ago? Is he here now?
He's dropped off again, I've just noticed.
Okay, well, he was briefly, so absent at the moment. Okay.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think Councillor Fernando is an apology. I know he's not been well this
Okay.
week. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, item number 3 of page 7 in your pack. These are the minutes of the last meeting held on the 16th of December 2020. Can I ask, first of all, are there any amendments to the minutes at all? No. In that
Proposal. Yeah.
In that case, yes. Councillor Alistair Ward-Booth.
Happy to propose the minutes, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ward-Booth. Councillor Angela Alder.
Happy to second.
Thank you very much. We have to vote on the minutes. So if you're happy with those, please press the green tick, but the red cross if you're not. Right, what I'm not getting, Peter and Stephen King, is the totals that I normally get, whether that's because I'm not joint host, which is possible, I suppose. But perhaps, Peter, then you can tell us if that's carried or not.
I can't actually see anything on my
Can't see
screen.
either. Stephen, can you tell us? Stephen King? Ah, wait a minute, I can see it now. Yes, that's all right, that's carried. Thank you very much. That was strange. Okay, thank you very much. We now go to item number 4, the declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at all this evening?
Councillor Wiley has his hand raised.
It was raised.
Yes, Chairman.
Oh, who's that?
Tim Page.
Tim Page. Councillor Page, go ahead.
Councillor Page.
Yes, and what's your
I have a
declaration?
non-pecuniary interest.
For what? Which
My
item?
declaration is that I have a agenda item 7. I have a non-pecuniary interest through my membership of Bishop Stortford Town Council. I reserve my right to speak and vote on this item.
So what was the reason? I didn't quite catch that. Say it again, please.
Sorry, you were breaking up a bit there, Councillor Page. So item number 7, because you're a member of Bishop Stortford Town Council, and then you said something we didn't quite catch.
Right to speak and for this item.
I think he said
That was even worse. I think when we get to item number 7, we'll see whether that is cleared, and then we can.
Chairman, I think what Councillor Page was saying was that he was reserving his right to speak on the item.
And to vote.
Yes.
And is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And then Councillor Wiley, his hand was up.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I too would like to say that as on item 7, I am a trustee of Rhodesborough Place Trust, and therefore I feel it would be beneficial for me to abstain on this.
Okay.
And anybody else has a declaration of interest?
Can't see any other hands.
No. Okay. Thank you very much. Right, we then go to item number 5, the implementation of a chargeable green waste charging service, page 47 of the agenda pack.
Sorry, Chairman, I've got a hand that's gone up from Manny Goldsmith.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Goldsmith, before we go to that.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm being a bit too advanced, I think.
Oh, okay.
I wish to speak about number 5.
No, fair enough. Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sure we'll come to you soon. We'll go first, though, to present this report to Councillor Graham McAndrew.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome members. In January 2020, the option for charging for a garden waste service was approved at Council as part of the medium-term financial plan. It identified an income of £400,000 for the 2021-22 financial year. The coronavirus pandemic has also had and continues to have a significant impact on all council budgets, and we are faced now with a greater challenge to balance budgets and enable us to deliver our statutory services, as well as services to those who need them. The purpose of this report is to seek agreement for a service change. This change will see the introduction of a charge for the collection of garden waste, like many of our Hertfordshire counterparts, including North Hertfordshire, our shared service partner. This report outlines the detail around the proposed service setup and reports back on the findings from the public consultation. We know and accept that any decision around charging for services which have previously been free is difficult for the public to accept. However, garden waste is a non-statutory service which we do not have to provide. And I believe the current financial position of the council leaves us no choice but to progress with this change for April 2021. Waste and recycling is the district's single largest expenditure, and charging for a garden waste collection service provides the single largest contributor to the medium-term financial plan for next financial year. A charge service allows us to continue to provide this service to those residents who need it. Without those residents who don't, such as those in flats, paying for it through the council tax. Alongside the service change, we will be promoting food waste reduction and home composting campaigns prior to providing a weekly food collection service in 2023, in line with the government's resources and waste strategy. We are not alone in consideration of a charged garden waste service. The majority of councils in England which provide a garden waste service now charge for it. My final recommendation in this report relates to our commitment to reducing food waste. Approximately 70% of the food waste from UK households that enters the residual waste stream is edible. We want to work with our residents, community champions and social influencers to significantly reduce the amount of food that is wasted. Not only is this good for our residents' purses, saving the average family of 4 approximately £60 a month, but it's also good for the environment. If we collectively reduce our food waste by over a third in East Herts, we will start to see a reduction in CO2 levels as a result of collecting, disposing and composting such waste. From the 1st of March, during the National Food Waste Action Week, we will launch a series of campaigns to proactively make a step change in the way we engage with our communities. Together, we will reduce the amount of food waste produced. This isn't just about posting information on social media platforms. This is about accepting that there are greater influencers in our community that can deliver messages that speaks to our community in a language that's meaningful to them and a voice that is much louder than ours alone. We are committed to doing this prior to providing a separate weekly food collection service in line with the government's resources and waste strategy. The target date for rollout is currently 2023. We hope by then food waste behaviours for some would have changed, resulting in significantly less food waste being produced and collected than providing a new service now, which we simply cannot afford to do at this stage. I ask fellow members to agree the recommendations which support the introduction of this service change. The recommendations need to be taken en bloc in order for the scheme to provide the projected financial return to benefit the council budget. The decision this evening will allow us to be ready for a scheme at the beginning of spring. Any delays will have a detrimental impact on the council's finances. And on that note, I will pass over to Councillor Williamson to say a few words on the finances. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Okay, many thanks indeed, Councillor McAndrew. Thank you, Chairman, and good evening to everybody. I would indeed like to say a few words on the importance of this proposal in relation to its contribution to our budget and our medium-term financial plan. I'm sure everybody in this meeting this evening is aware of the Council's current financial plight. When I presented the medium-term financial plan as part of the budget at our meeting in January last year, we already had a gap in our budget for 2021 to 22 of over £1.5 million. Indeed, we recognised some years ago that financing the Council's services would get progressively more difficult, and as a result, we have over the last few years made a range of savings intended to enable us to continue to deliver valued services, but at lower cost. But we have now got to the point where there are no more easy savings to be made. All the low-hanging fruit has been picked. In parallel to these savings exercises, we developed a number of strategies, particularly under our financial sustainability policy, to put measures in place to provide us with additional sources of income in order to compensate for our lost funding. Chief amongst these has been a strategy of investment in commercial property ownership, which would give us a good revenue return. However, on the 25th of November last year, this strategy was brought to an abrupt halt when it was announced that councils would no longer be able to apply to the Public Works Loans Board, not only for financing projects designed primarily for profit, but indeed they will no longer provide any funding to an authority that has investment for yield anywhere within its capital programme. Therefore, not only can we no longer carry on down this path, but the viability of our other main strategy for additional income generation, further residential property investment through our company Millstream, is also now in doubt. As a result, £500,000 of potential income on which we had been planning to help us to bridge the gap in our budget next year is now denied us. And then we have had COVID. Whilst the government has provided funding for councils to counter some losses due to the virus, this has only gone part way to mitigate the overall impact on our finances, and the situation has just been made even more difficult as we look to create a balanced budget for 2021-22. When separate green waste collection began in 2010, financially we were in an entirely different place. We were able to introduce a service at no cost to residents other than what they paid through their council tax. At that time, we had significantly more funding from government. The revenue support grant was over £5 million, which represented about 1/3 of the funding towards our net cost of services. That money has been taken away from our annual settlements progressively and was removed finally 3 years ago. Therefore, our ability to fund a free green waste collection has progressively declined to the point it is simply no longer viable. The charge we are proposing to introduce for residents is less than £2 per collection. And to put that into some perspective, when taken over the course of a full year, is less than the cost of buying the local newspaper each week. But when taken collectively across the expected take-up from residents, adds to a significant sum which is now vital if we are to continue to provide other services to our residents across the district. If we are not able to agree this tonight, then a sum equivalent to this saving will need to be found elsewhere, which could well have a more severe and unwanted impact on the services that we are able to provide.
Thank you, Councillor Williamson. So, Councillor McAndrew, you're proposing this?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the recommendations A to E on page 40 of the report, which will be seconded by Councillor Tony Stowe, who will reserve his right to speak. Chairman?
Yes, Councillor Stowe, you happy to second that?
Yes, happy to second that.
And to reserve your right?
I'll reserve my right to speak later, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to propose some amendments to the proposals on page 48. These amendments are as follows.
Okay, sorry, yes, you're quite at liberty to propose them, but we have to apparently take them individually. So we'll have to speak on your amendment A, and then vote on that, and then B, and vote on that, and then C. That's the advice I've been given. So if you just want to stick to talking about A just for the moment.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to say what it is, and then as soon as I have a seconder, then I would like to speak about it. Is that all right?
Well,
yes.
Normally you would speak about it now.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So if you do that all in one go, yeah.
All right. Well, the amendments are A. I would like to propose that we delete the present A and make a new one. That this council resolves to defer making a decision on charging for garden waste only collections. Defer this until 1. Arrangements for the collection of food waste have been designed, and 2. Detailed assessments of the carbon emissions which would be caused by the change in collection have been made. So we would like to defer the decision tonight until these things have taken place. Now, I do understand, Mr. Chairman, that this council is trying to find ways to reduce its costs and to save money. But I do not think that it is right that to make these savings by reducing the service which the council provides to the community. And the most serious flaw in what is being proposed tonight is the lack of provision for weekly collection of food waste. It's interesting that some of our neighbouring district councils, like Chelmsford, Uttlesford and North Herts, amongst them, they do charge for garden waste collections, but at the same time, they also provide a free weekly collection of food waste. If these other councils can do it, I fail to see why East Herts could not, especially as we have joint working arrangements with North Herts District Council. Now, our papers tonight suggest that residents will very quickly learn how to do home composting of food waste. I think that this is completely unrealistic. Indeed, our council's own recent survey showed that 50% of respondents said that they had no interest in doing home composting. It's difficult enough, even if you have a garden with a compost bin into which you can put all your vegetable peelings. It's very difficult to know how do you dispose of chicken bones or other meat bones without attracting rats. So it is difficult to do, even if you have a garden. But if you live in a flat or a house with no garden, it's virtually impossible to do this. So I think it's quite unrealistic for our council to say that they will very soon get everybody doing home composting of food waste. Another serious flaw in what is proposed is that many residents who choose not to pay for the brown bin collection may well put all their garden waste into their black bins. And this was confirmed by the council's recent survey, when only 34% of respondents said that they would either home compost or take this green waste to the household waste recycling centre. More waste in black bins increases the amount going to landfill and increases the council's costs, and it is bad for the environment. Reduced green waste being collected also affects our arrangements with the county council, and this has a knock-on effect of that council's finances. So there are other flaws in what is being proposed tonight, but I'll stop now and let other councillors have a chance to speak. But I do urge everyone, please to support this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Goldspink. I did have Councillor Sophie Bell up, though the blue hand is gone. Councillor Bell, did you want to speak now?
You're on mute, Sophie.
Councillor Sophie Bell, are you there?
Yeah, sorry, muted. I think it is regrettable that the council has reached a stage where cost-cutting measures such as these are required. Unfortunately, as we have not yet seen the budget for the next financial year, it is very difficult for me to comment on how necessary the introduction of a scheme such as this is. However, I will say it is rather odd, considering how emphatic this council was on sustainability at the last meeting, that they want to implement a scheme which will undoubtedly have a negative impact on levels of recycling in this county. Going into more detail on this proposal, I note that page 51 of the agenda report pack mentions other councils who currently operate a charge scheme for garden waste. Broxbourne, North Herts, Watford and Welwyn Hatfield all collect food waste separate to garden waste and general waste on a weekly basis. Indeed, as I understand it, it will become mandatory for all councils to collect food waste separately from other types of waste from 2023. And it seems rather counterintuitive to introduce and educate the public that they need to put this waste in the black bin from April, only to change our message again less than 2 years later when we implement this scheme in line with new legislation. I applaud attempts to reduce food waste across the district and believe that is very worthwhile. But the idea that all residents can get around this by composting feels rather out of touch with the situation of many of our residents. Many of our residents, as shown by the survey responses, will not have the space to compost their food waste. I myself lived in a flat until September of last year, and at that time I would have been one of those people who would have found it very difficult to do so. Others may have very small outdoor spaces, may be unable to do so due to disability or age, or may simply have too many work commitments to have time to dedicate to such a task. I'm thinking particularly of our doctors and nurses in the district, who will undoubtedly be rushed off their feet as it is at the moment. I would therefore employ this council to reject the plans as they are at the moment and defer until we've had a chance to properly investigate an alternative regarding the disposal of food waste to simply putting it in the black bins. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you seconding the proposal?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Ian Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I first heard of the possibility of charging for garden waste collection, which was some considerable time ago, my initial reaction was to be against it. However, when I considered the arguments on both sides, I changed my mind. And as Councillor McAndrew has pointed out, this is a non-statutory service, but it does incur a very substantial cost for the council. The briefing notes showed it is over £1 million per annum. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have a garden, but many of our residents don't. In effect, our residents who live in flats or who already compost all their green waste are subsidising those of us who do generate garden waste. I'm very grateful that the council has provided this useful service for free for many years, but particularly in these difficult times when it's harder than ever for the council to balance its budget, it's right that we should pay something towards this additional optional service. And to individual households, the cost won't be large. It's around £50 a year, less than £1 a week. But added together, that's going to generate several £100,000 each year that'll go a long way to offsetting the cost of providing this service. Now, I would much rather prefer to pay this modest amount rather than see the green waste collection withdrawn altogether, or alternatively, major cuts in other services provided by the council. Either of those actions would also have a potential negative impact on jobs. In fact, the majority of councils around the country now charge for garden waste. Our residents have written to us with genuine concerns about possible adverse effects of charging, like the possibility of increased fly tipping, and whether people will put garden waste in with their black bins. But the experience of those other councils is, in fact, those potential problems have not happened. The biggest worry about the scheme is the proposal that food waste can no longer be collected with garden waste. And I emphasise that having looked into this, it is a reluctant decision of the council, and it's due to national legislation, which makes it unclear whether food waste collection, which is a statutory requirement and free of charge, can be mixed with chargeable garden waste, leading to a possible legal risk. I think we're all agreed this is very regrettable because food waste and garden waste currently go to the excellent Cumberlow facility to be composted. And removing this option so that food waste either goes to landfill or incineration is inconvenient for residents, and it increases our carbon footprint. In landfill, it produces methane, which is a virulent greenhouse gas. Even in an energy for waste system, the carbon footprint per tonne is higher than from composting. And other groups, such as the Bishop Stortford Climate Change Group, have expressed concerns to us. So councillors have been working together with the executive and officers over recent weeks to see what can be done about this. I understand that the advice given to households has been reconsidered and is being reworded. But I have also approached the Member of Parliament for Hertford and Stortford, Julie Marson, and she is supportive and is submitting a parliamentary written question on this subject, because obviously if it's national legislation, we've got to deal with it at a national level. Personally, I would hope that the legislation is either changed or clarified to make it absolutely clear that food waste can voluntarily continue to be collected with garden waste. That would also benefit other councils locally and indeed nationally, and contribute to reducing our waste and carbon footprint as a nation. In the medium term, there is, of course, the food waste collection plans. I very much welcome the plans to introduce these as soon as possible. I think many of us would like to see it earlier than 2023, but we do have to face, again, the fact there is a substantial capital cost involved in doing that, and we have to find that from our budgets, and at the moment the money simply isn't there. So overall, I believe firstly that introducing charging for our garden waste collections is the right and fair thing to do, and secondly that it would be financially irresponsible for us to defer it. And therefore, I will be supporting the original motion and opposing the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Can I just mention, by the way, I've got to mention this earlier on, if anybody were to make any reference to pages 177 and 178, where there are financial figures, we will have to go into a part 2. In other words, we'll have to exclude press and the public and close down the YouTube channel for whilst that is being spoken about. So if anybody during the discussion, whether it's during the amendments or the original proposal, wants to refer to that, please can you let us know, and ideally if we can keep that to the end, that would be the easiest thing to do. Councillor Carolyn Redfern.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting. My thought process has followed the same route as Councillor Kemp's, actually, until I looked a little bit further at the documents, and then I was alarmed about the extra CO2 emissions that would come from this food waste going into landfill. And and I do understand that the council, I felt that the council needed to save this money, and I feel it does need to save this money, but perhaps this is not the way when it goes absolutely against the green agenda, sustainability, and Hertfordshire County Council don't approve of it either. Why can't we get the food waste sorted out and then introduce this? And I mean, we keep saying the county council can't afford it. There are a lot of people who are suffering from COVID problems, like losing jobs, being on furlough, like not having enough money. And you're asking them suddenly to pay £50 out of an already squeezed purse. And the thing that really jumped out at me was the mitigation for the 6% of people who don't have a bank account was to suggest that the council officers help them to open one. I mean, this is just, there is a reason that people do not have bank accounts. It is because they do not have enough money to have bank accounts. So, or they don't have the wherewithal to operate a bank account. So the idea that people can open a bank account just to pay for this waste thing is outrageous. And I think if the council can't help the few people that need to pay in cash by letting them come with their cash, it's a very poor showing of our flexibility indeed. For someone to have a debit card or a credit card to pay this bill is just unconscionable. I'm sorry, I just think it's wrong. If they can't afford to have a bank account, they shouldn't really be paying this in any case. Is there anything for people, is there any mitigation for people who simply cannot afford to pay this?
Okay,
so,
thank you.
I object on quite a few grounds there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redfern. Councillor Louis Cole.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to begin by saying that I do understand the financial pressures which this council has to endure. It's a very difficult situation that's been made worse by the COVID crisis, for sure. However, I'd like to remind members of the corporate motto that we adopted not so long ago, which was SEED, if you remember correctly, where the S is sustainability at the heart of everything we do. Now, to me, I think basically, if we're being honest here, the proposals are saying that we're in a bit of a dire financial situation and we are going to sacrifice sustainability goals to close the budget. And I understand this, but I think we should be being more honest about it if that's what we're doing, because the facts as received from our officers are these. That food waste, which goes into the black bin rather than the brown bin, costs 17 times more in terms of carbon emissions than if it went into composting. So that's 800 grams of CO2 versus 49 grams of CO2. That's a factor of 17. Under the current scheme, we generate about 4,500 tons of CO2 from food waste, and only a smaller amount of tons from food waste going into the brown bins. So for a total of, yes, 4,500 tonnes. Under this new scheme that's been proposed, the estimate is that this would rise to 6,500 tonnes of CO2. So an increase of 2,000 tonnes of CO2. And this is because of all of the food waste which would go to the black bins that should have gone to the brown bins. Now, it's also been suggested that if we implemented the separate food waste collection, this would only increase the carbon cost in terms of vehicle movements by 144 tonnes. So that's barely 6% of the increase. So I think this really shows that we are, by adopting these proposals, we're making a fairly grievous step back in terms of our carbon footprint for our waste disposal. Now, adding to this also the fact that our county council colleagues have asked us to defer this decision so that we can find a way to work with them to create synergies and efficiencies to try and mitigate this. And adding to this the fact that in barely 2 years' time, we're going to have to change this whole system again to comply with national legislation about food waste. It seems a bit of a step backwards, really, to have to adopt these proposals now. Especially because we have not seen the budget for this year as councillors, and that makes it very difficult to really have a full understanding of exactly the financials and whether there are other places that we can make this saving. Look, I'll stop here, Chairman, but I just want to reiterate the point that this is a really huge step backwards in terms of our carbon footprint, and it doesn't fit with our corporate motto of sustainability at the heart of everything we do. And therefore, I would really encourage members to accept the amendment so that we can find a way of managing this in a more sustainable way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Core. Councillor Alex Curtis.
Thank you, Chairman. So firstly, I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Kemp for all of the things he so eloquently said. This is the right thing to do, and this is the fair thing to do. I don't dispute some of the many of the points that Councillor Core, for example, just made about the impact in terms of the carbon footprint. But at the same time, I'd say, yeah, it's great what Julie Marston, our local MP, is doing, putting out written questions in to work out how we can alleviate some of those concerns. There are no easy options here. There's always trade-offs. We're here to govern as a council. We're not here to posture. We're not here to say, oh, look, sort of, I'm going to oppose this because it has an impact or this or that. Because yes, we can avoid having an impact in terms of the carbon footprint. But what we're going to do to sort of to make up for that in terms of what we're going to cut for the budget. We're talking about a massive sum of money here. St Albans Council, which incidentally is has a Lib Dem administration, agreed at the cabinet meeting in November that it will introduce green waste charges due to the budgetary impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that in some sort of the briefing, there's some email chains as I've seen on this topic, that St Albans Council, with its recycling rates increase over the last 12 months or so, has been sort of heralded as a case study of brilliance in that respect, in terms of reducing the district council's carbon footprint. So yes, what are they going to do? What's the Liberal Democrat group going to do to make up the funding? Are they going to cut all of the grants we give to community organisations? Are they going, yeah, what are they going to cut? Because it's all well and good saying we're going to oppose this because of the impact on the, in terms of the temporary impact on carbon footprint, but that comes with costs as well. There's no easy options here, and I think that what's proposed in terms of the original motion is ethically the best in terms of meeting all of the different aspects of our corporate plan, so that we support our community, support our local economy, support our residents, and indeed support the environment. And I'm really pleased by what Councillor Kemp highlighted about the work Julie Marston, our local MP, is doing to mitigate some of these temporary carbon footprint impacts, which are significant, but when balanced against everything else, they are outweighed. So yeah, I just want to put that to the Liberal Democrat group leader, to Councillor Goldspink. What are you going to cut? If we can't have this, where are you going to make up the £1 million or whatever? I mean, it's got to be made up somewhere.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curtis. Councillor Mary Brady.
I would like to say I fully support Councillor Goldspink's amendment, and I would just like to add that the equality impact analysis has not looked at the affordability for certain user groups, which reiterates a little bit what Councillor Redfern has said, but it is a major consideration. Some of our residents are living in social housing, and the older social housing stock have got very big gardens. And I do know from people that I have spoken to who live in Surrey that after they introduced a fee for garden waste, fly tipping increased enormously.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. Councillor Chris Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. There's been a lot of talk about this being a not a statutory service, and indeed it isn't a statutory service you have to provide. And taken on its own, it will be a reluctant option that we could pursue, in my view, if it wasn't for the fact that these impacts the carbon emissions and the fact that the food waste is not collected separately. In response to Councillor Curtis, I do believe that St Albans has a separate food waste collection, and that is the main point that we're making here. In being a statutory service, it feels like we're hiding behind the fact it isn't statutory. That is not the important thing here. The important thing is we have a moral duty to the residents to maintain the environment, and this council has recognised this on many occasions. So yes, of course we want to save money. Yes, we need to find savings somewhere else, but we wouldn't cut statutory services because this should be in line with statutory service. It is as important as that, and this council has recognised that, as Councillor Corber said, in its corporate policy. And all I can say is that, given the comments from the last meeting, if we do actually adopt this, if you can adopt this very unsustainable policy, I can only presume they have a great sense of irony, having accused us of not being sustainable last time.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Terence Beckett.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to reiterate, having checked that St Albans do have a separate food waste collection, which is the biggest sticking point for me on this policy, and also, as mentioned by other councillors, the fact that we do have residents who are currently financially squeezed at the moment. And I know the council are also equally squeezed financially, but I would ask Councillor Curtis to explain how we can viably say where we might be able to make other savings when we haven't seen the budget. So, and without seeing that, we can't make a decision.
All right, Councillor Beckett, thank you very much indeed. I'm sorry I can't go back to Councillor Dumont to Councillor Curtis because you've spoken, but you can speak.
I haven't spoken, Chairman.
Oh, haven't you? I'm sorry, I thought you had. I do apologise. Go ahead.
I don't think I did, but I mean, Terence kind of got in there before me anyway. I'm just going to say I've heard some really out of touch things being said. It's clearly a very, very serious issue, but some of the arguments being put forward by the ruling party here are just, I mean, really, really out of touch. But I was just going to say what Terence said. Yeah, it's all very well of Councillor Curtis to very directly ask the leader of the opposition party here what she would do differently. I would fire the question back: how are we meant to do that when we've been asking for a budget briefing, I think, with all the opposition parties, and we haven't had it yet? So the question goes straight back: how should we do that?
Thank you very much indeed. And I think probably finally, we'll come back to the Cabinet Member, Councillor Graham McAndrew, to respond to some of these issues that have been raised in this proposal of Amendment A.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Chairman. The first thing is that the reason that we're actually doing this is because it's, we have got a budget deficit. And the only way we can fill this budget deficit, or the only way that has been identified to fill this budget deficit, is to charge for green waste. Now, I think the party opposite, the Lib Dems, are actually saying that they haven't had the opportunity to sort of discuss these things. Now, I do know that for members' information, in December of last year, the leader of the council, Councillor Linda Hasey, spoke to Councillor Goldspink and talked about alternative budget from the Lib Dems. Now, currently, today, I understand nothing has been forthcoming, And we've only got another 5 weeks for papers to be finalised for the budget that will be going forward to the council in March. Now, it's not in service. Flats, there's no brown bins in flats unless it's communal brown bins. And obviously it's a temporary measure until we get a system in place to actually collect food waste. Now, what we're actually doing this evening is bridging a gap of £400,000 or £500,000 to have a budget to introduce a food waste service. We would be looking for another £1 million. I have been speaking to my county colleagues. They sent me something private and confidential. I went back to them and says, I will have no problem introducing a food collection service this year if you can bridge a gap in our finances. They haven't come forward with the money. So what we've got to do is we've actually got to look at the financial situation. And yes, there are trade-offs. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we are, and this is unintended consequences. On the fly tipping, there's no actual physical evidence that when garden waste charging has been introduced, that there's been an increase or a substantial increase in fly tipping. Fly tipping, people see fly tipping as fridges, freezers, mattresses, etc., rather than sort of a few branches the side of the road. So deferring the decision creates a significant shortfall in the middle term financial plan. As stated, charging for a garden waste service, only collection service, provides the single largest financial contribution to the council's budget. I am unaware of any other proposal that could match this contribution. To emphasise again, we will be delivering a weekly food waste collection service within 2 years, in line with the government's resources and waste strategy. We cannot afford to do this now. We have the costings and mechanisms in place to execute this swiftly as soon as we are required to do so by the government. An assessment of carbon emissions, and this is where Councillor Louis Coe's probably slightly ahead of me because I've been exchanging emails with the head of operations. We estimate that there's approximately 5,500 tonnes of food waste in our residual stream. That is food that goes into the black bin and is disposed of via energy from waste. County colleagues have advised that the treatment of food waste via energy from waste generates 821 kilograms of CO2 per tonne of food waste. And I understand that I believe 70% of our waste goes to energy from waste, not landfill. In contrast, we estimate that currently approximately 2,500 tonnes of food waste goes into the brown bin and is dealt through in-vessel composting. County colleagues have informed us that in-vessel composting generates 49 kilograms of CO2 per tonne of food waste. This means that our combined food waste disposal through energy from waste and composting generates around 4,638 tonnes of CO2. In line with national drives and other local authorities' programmes, we are committed to reducing food waste. Around 80% of the food waste can be readily reduced, and so a 30% in East Hearts would be credible. This will enable us to start seeing reductions in CO2 levels from the food waste stream. Emissions from energy from waste arising from the reduction level of food waste gives a CO2 emissions figure of 4,598 tonnes. This is in line with the current situation. Based on vehicle carbon emissions data from a neighbouring authority, which collects food separately on a weekly basis, We estimate the vehicle emissions would increase by approximately 144 tonnes of CO2. Thus, in line with the waste hierarchy, tackling food waste will be our key priority in the waste service prior to the rollout of a weekly food service, in line with the government's strategy. In relation to consulting with the County Council officers, met with the Head of Waste and Hearts Waste Partnership Manager on the 2nd of December and again on the 18th of December. We also received consultation feedback from portfolio holder at Hertfordshire County Council on the 24th of December, which was marked private and confidential. I have provided a summary in my report. We also received formal feedback from the Minerals and Waste team on the 30th of December. Again, highlights are available in the report. We may not fully align in the relation to service changes. However, we believe we have consulted sufficiently. I do have to remind members that the introduction of a chargeable garden waste service is a financial one first and foremost. I emphasise it's a financial one first and foremost. For members, I have to advise that we will not be supporting the proposed recommendations put forward by the Liberal Democrats, as they do not cover the financial deficit. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McAndrew. I will take just a few more, but I do want to go to Amendment B in a moment. We'll have a vote and then Amendment B. Councillor Ben Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to speak in support of, I think, what others have said about the damaging increase in carbon emissions that not instigating a food waste scheme will lead to. It was good to see some figures provided by officers before this meeting, but I noticed that there are about 30% of the waste, the black waste, could end up in landfill. So there's no guarantee, we have no guarantee that that won't happen, because that's Hertfordshire County Council's responsibility. And so every tonne of food waste that goes into landfill generates a huge amount of methane, which is incredibly damaging. And that hasn't been included in the calculations. And so I appreciate that it's a financial balance, deciding whether we include food waste collection in our service for the next 2 years. I think it's very important. I think it's a mistake not to consider it more carefully, given those figures. And I would also back up the fact that opposition groups have not had a briefing on the budget, and so we are unable to produce any alternative models. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crystal. Councillor Alistair Ward-Booth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to repeat any arguments that have been made over green waste. I'm going to mention the surprise I find myself in that the opposition are saying that they have no information about the budget. At the Audit and Governance Committee meeting on the 17th of November 2020, at which several opposition councillors were present, item 10 on the agenda was Budget 2021-22 and Medium-Term Financial Plan 2021 to 2024 proposals, and Appendix B to the detailed report listed a whole suite of proposals. So it is not okay for opposition councillors to sit here tonight and say they do not have any budget information when several of them sat at a meeting that considered budget.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we said that. I think we said we haven't had our briefing and we haven't seen the full budget.
Well, I think the point that's been made by some councillors is there was discussions and members' information, as well as that audit committee providing some information, but perhaps it wasn't a full budget briefing that you may have liked. I don't know. Councillor John Wiley.
Thank you, Chairman. It must be rather embarrassing for the Lib Dems. They've all been piling in to say that they haven't had sight of the budget, when actually we find out in December their leader was asked to prepare an opposition budget, but doesn't seem to have done so and doesn't seem to have passed that down to her members. So
I would ask Councillor Goldspink, where are we going to make the savings? It's a very heavy heart I have that I'm voting for this tonight, because I've always fought against green charges. However, I understand that the council needs the money. COVID has slammed our finances to pieces. And if the opposition are given the option to produce an alternative budget, then show us. We may actually agree with some things, but if you're not going to do it, don't sit there playing party politics.
Thank you, Councillor Wiley. Councillor Mark Pope.
Yeah, I just have to say really quickly, I fully support the comments that have been made, certainly by Councillor Ward Booth, about the papers that came to the Audit and Governance Committee in November. In addition to that, even before that, in August 2020, there was a members' information session where the challenges that we were facing with regard to the budget and the medium-term financial plan were discussed. So even before the November Audit and Governance meeting, these issues were raised to all councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pope. Well, now we're going to take a vote on Amendment A. This council resolves to defer making a decision on charging for garden waste collections until 1, arrangements for the collection of food waste have been designed, and 2, detailed assessments of the carbon emissions which would be caused by the change in collections have been made. So if you can vote on the amendment, please. If you're in favour of the amendment, the green tick. If you're against the amendment, the red cross, and the blue or yellow hand if you're abstaining. Thank you very much. That amendment then has been lost. That's Amendment A. We now go on to Amendment B. Councillor Goldspink, would you like to speak on that briefly?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Amendment B is that this council will consult with the county council on the whole matter of garden waste, food waste, and residual food waste collections.
Thank you. Sorry, go on. Please go
ahead. I think this is very important because we do have to work with our county council colleagues, and when they were consulted on this, they expressly said they would like us to defer any decision for the time being, because particularly with our garden waste, that if we have a reduced amount of garden waste collected, that will have an impact on our relationship with the county, because they have a contract about the amount of garden waste which should be delivered for the proper composting. So what we decide tonight could have financial implications for the county council. So I think it is only right that we should have proper consultation with them and to defer our decision tonight as the county councillors request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldspink. Can I ask if anybody does have any comments or questions that they're new points that haven't been raised tonight, which has so far actually been quite an interesting discussion. Councillor Bell, are you seconding this?
Yes, I'm seconding this.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Ian Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I understand the amendment, but it seems to me somewhat unnecessary, as surely our officers and our executive will have been in discussion with the county council for a considerable time over this, and they may not have seen eye to eye in all respects, but it's simply asking for something that is normal ongoing practice. And possibly some of our colleagues can cover that further. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Graham McAndrew.
Yeah, I can confirm that officers and members do liaise with county council colleagues on a regular basis through the various departments and through the Hertfordshire Waste Partnership with all the districts and boroughs. So there is communication, and it's a very strong communication. And as Councillor Kemp sort of pointed out, we don't necessarily agree on everything that we do.
Has Councillor McAndrew frozen?
Go on.
Sorry, Councillor McAndrew, we lost you for the last 20 seconds.
All right, okay.
Do you want to
Can
just repeat what
hear
you're
me?
saying? You can hear you, yes. So go ahead now.
Okay, yeah. We do speak and liaise with our county council colleagues, and we do speak to the Hertfordshire Waste Partnership. There's meetings every 3 months, and the officers have officer groups where they get together on a regular basis. So it's not as though that we don't.
I think we've
agree on, yeah.
I think we lost you again for a little bit, but I think we've got the gist of what you're trying to say, Councillor McAndrew. Thank you very much indeed. We'll take a vote on Amendment B that's being proposed. This council will consult with the County Council on the whole matter of garden waste, food waste and residual waste collections. If you're in favour of Amendment B, please vote the green yes. If you're not in favour, the red cross, and abstaining, the blue and yellow hand. Thank you. Thank you very much. That has been rejected, Amendment B. So we'll then go on to Amendment C. Councillor Goldsmith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Amendment C is that the results of all these consultations and emissions examinations should be brought back to our Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the District Council. These results should come back to the O&S Committee for detailed examination before any recommendation is presented to the full council, so that we could have detailed examination. I know that it was a year ago that this council said yes, it would look at the option of charging for garden waste, but I don't think we've ever had a real opportunity for full discussion and scrutiny of all the implications, all the knock-on effects, and particularly all the effects on the environment, and all the difficulties associated with food waste collection. So I do think it would be important, and it would be much more democratic if the whole matter could come back to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and that is what I would like to propose. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goldsmith. Councillor Sophie Bell.
So we've already discussed the issue regarding food waste collection. One of the other reasons I think this should go through Overview and Scrutiny before it comes back to full council is that, as already discussed by other members this evening, there's no mention of offering a reduction in fee for residents on lower incomes. Most specifically, North Herts charge a reduced rate for residents who pay a reduced council tax because of reduced income. It would seem sensible for us to do the same, especially when many residents will be facing reduced or lost income due to the impact of coronavirus. In general, this entire proposal is quite poorly thought out. The suggestion is that this is an acceptable option for this council, as many other councils in the area have a similar policy, but this council's policy doesn't come close to what other districts such as North Herts offer, and the suggestion that food waste should go in the black bin seems a massive step backwards for the council. It also seems counterintuitive when we share a service with North Herts to operate a system which is vastly different to them. Stating that we can't currently put in a food waste collection because of money issues seems like we're simply kicking the can further down the road. Changing the system now and then having to change it again in 2 years' time will incur extra charges, such as publicising the change to the district and staff time involved to implement not one but 2 changes to the way food waste is handled by the district in under 2 years. Councillor McAndrew stated that there is no evidence that garden waste reduction will result in an increase in fly tipping. North Herts have reported an increase in fly tipping since the garden waste charge was introduced there, and indeed responders to our own survey have suggested that they will either fly tip or burn their garden waste going forward if this plan is enacted. Therefore, I support the proposal to defer this motion until it has been discussed in more detail by the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, so that issues such as these can be discussed and addressed before the council votes on it in full.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bell. Councillor McAndrew, do you want to come back on any of those issues that Councillor Bell raised?
Councillor Kay, can we just confirm that Councillor Bell was seconding?
Oh yes, Councillor Bell, you're seconding?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, yeah.
There's one or two other speakers.
All right, I'll come back to you last as the Cabinet Member, and I'll come next to Councillor Bob Deering.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Hayes' hand was up before me, if you want to take it in that order. Okay, thanks very much.
You go ahead and I'll come to
Councillor Hayes' consent. I've got to say that the more I sit and listen to this debate, the more it seems to me that the opposition parties, and perhaps particularly the Lib Dems, simply are incapable of making a decision. We have a financial situation at this council which needs to be addressed. The reality is that we are talking about taxpayers' money, contributions made by our neighbours, ordinary people that live in East Hertfordshire, towards that we then use for expenditure. I haven't heard a single member of the opposition offer any justification at all as to why people who live in flats with no gardens should subsidise people who live in houses that do have gardens. Nor, very tellingly, have I heard the leader of the Lib Dem group respond to the point blank comment from, I think, our leader, that she was offered a consultation on the budget last year and has not taken that consultation offer up. And if that is not right, then you should say so now, Councillor Goldspink. But if it is right, that it is not acceptable that you sit in this meeting and purport to say that you've not had an opportunity to consult and consider the budget. And nor have I. It's all very well for opposition members to shake their heads, but there's no reaction at all to the notion that this went through the Audit and Governance Committee last year as well, which is a public domain committee of this council. So the notion that you don't have an opportunity to comment on the budget is simply doesn't arise. These are decisions that have to be confronted, have to be made, and ducking them or delaying them is just dither.
Thank you, Councillor Deering. Councillor Linda Hazy.
Thank you. I completely concur with what Councillor Deering has been saying, and perhaps also I think a number of us are have got connection problems at the moment. And when Councillor McAndrew disappears off or we can't hear him, he's obviously going to look for his cardboard so he can sleep comfortably in his bed. But I think this is totally unacceptable that opposition members are using rhetoric as opposed to actual ideas. And I think we need to really do have to make this decision. And you have all been offered the opportunity through Audit and Governance to look at the ideas. You do have opportunities to contact officers directly and come up with something that actually this is what we need to do. Do we want to cut all our grant activity? No, we don't. Do we want to take all our litter collection bins away? No, we don't. But we do have to make very difficult decisions, and this is just the first of ones which will come forward over the next 2 to 3 years. We have £4 million that we have to find in the next coming years, and that is not going to be easy for any of us. So please, let's work together. Let's make sure that we actually find ways where we can cut food waste. It's absolutely totally unacceptable how much food is thrown away. And we need to work very publicly with helping people understand what we have to do in terms of cutting down, not just food waste, but any sort of waste whatsoever. The whole idea is less waste, less landfill, and also more composting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hazy. Councillor Carolyn Redfern.
I'm very sorry to say that I find Councillor Deering has a very sneering attitude towards the opposition. It's all very well to say the Lib Dems should come up with a new budget, but they do not have the resources to do so as the council officers have. And I just think that's very unfair to throw brickbats like that at the opposition in that tone of voice. Of course we all support the lessening of food waste. Of course we do. But I think, again, this This is all in the wrong way round. We need a food waste collection. We need to persuade people to do less food waste. I couldn't agree more. But this is the wrong way of going about it. Once again, the cart before the horse. We should have that thing in place like other local authorities have. Then I would be in favour of charging for green waste with, as Councillor Bell said, some exceptions for people who really can't afford to pay it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Redfern. Councillor Chris Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just saying that I'd like to say that Councillor Deering has this slightly the wrong way round. Talking about some residents subsidising other residents, but if we were to maintain having the waste as it is now, or have a separate food waste, then every resident benefits because the environment benefits. So everybody, even if they have these flats or houses, will all benefit from maintaining things as they are, or indeed having that food waste separate. However, the council is quite happy to invest money in sports centres, which not everyone will use because they won't be able to, theatres, where not everyone will be able to attend because they'll be able to afford it or they don't want to. I'm not against those things on principle, but that is how the council works. We will be paying for things that some people use and some people won't. The argument does not make sense.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor David Snowden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, I find myself thinking that Councillor Redfern is completely and utterly wrong on the matter of whether the opposition are capable of producing an alternate budget. I myself have been an opposition member on a London Borough Authority, and for 6 years I produced an alternate budget, year in, year out, and that was when the majority group was the Labour Party. So it is quite feasible, it is quite doable, and quite frankly, it's a cop-out when the opposition don't do so.
Thank you, Councillor Snowden. Councillor Goldspink, I can't come back to you because you spoke originally on this, but you can come back when assuming we speak about the original motion. But Councillor Ian Kemp, I don't think you've spoken particularly on this amendment, have you?
That's correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that although the details of budgeting may be tricky, that it is possible to take broad brush estimates and to see what the very large amounts are involved in, for example, setting up a food waste service and the costs that would be involved in that. And so it's possible to see things in a broad brushing, and small changes in other areas simply won't account for that. The other point, Councillor Wilson made the point about the council investing in other larger projects, but all of us as councillors have recently undergone financial training, which has made it clear that some things have to come from the revenue account and some things have to come from capital projects which involve borrowing, and that we're not allowed to mix the two. Much as we might like to, it's unfortunately legally prohibited.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Graham McAndrew, do you want to come back on some of these points?
Thank you, Chairman. I think if we go back to the opposition saying they haven't had an opportunity to engage with the budget. Last year in March, the budget was set, and within that budget, quite a thick bundle of papers. And on there, it had the medium-term financial plan. How much we would have to recover to pay for this forthcoming year, how much of a deficit for the following year, how much of a deficit for the year after, and how much of a deficit the year after that. So nothing's been hidden. And I just believe that the opposition hasn't sort of sat down and said, right, this is the budget. Next year, we've got £1 million deficit. What can we do? What is our budget? Where can we see the savings? And yeah, we've just had training, 2 training sessions last month on revenue and capital costs, what you can do, what you can't do. And as Councillor Wiley's pointed out, and Councillor Alster-Ward-Booth, there's been many opportunities where papers have gone forward through the committees during the course of the year where contributions could have been made. So nothing's been done behind Andy's back, and there's been an opportunity every step of the way for everybody to make a valuable contribution to the budget. Unfortunately, this year we've had to sit back. We haven't got the comfort factor of the money that we charge the ratepayers comes in that will balance the budget. Now, if we're going to be introducing collection of food waste, that's £1 million.
Council taxpayers, by the way.
It's poor Joe Bloggs that's got to pay extra money, and that extra money will probably be more than the £1 per week that we're asking the people who's going to be paying for the green waste collections, and it's an opt-in service. North Hearts, yes, they've had an increase in fly tipping, but that's been a result of coronavirus. That wasn't a result of introducing charging green waste. So I think leave it there, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McAndrew. We're now going to take a vote on Amendment C. The results of A and B, which we discussed before, should be presented to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for detailed examination before being presented to full council. If you're in favour of Amendment C, please press the green tick, and if you're against, the red cross, and if you're abstaining, the blue or yellow hand. Thank you very much indeed, and proposal Amendment C has been rejected. So we now go back to the original proposal from... Sorry, yes.
Councillor Stowe want to speak now, or is he still? Is he not going to? As a seconder, I don't think he's spoken on.
He's the seconder of the original proposal. Do you want to speak now, Councillor Stowe, or would you rather speak a little bit later?
Councillor Kay, can I just interject very quickly? It's a technical point, but the amendments that I have seen before me is also suggesting that Amendment D be deleted and not be replaced with anything. So technically that needs to be dealt with as well, because what I've been provided for is that A, B and C be deleted and be replaced with A, B and C. So the question around proposal recommendation D still stands.
So you're saying that the proposed amendment to delete D needs to be voted upon?
I suppose the question goes to Councillor Goldspink whether she still wants to put that forward. If she doesn't, then clearly there's nothing to consider, but that's what I've been notified that was coming. So I just wanted to double check whether that was still coming forward.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, it was originally proposed, but in view of the fact that all the others have been defeated, I don't think there's any point in pursuing with that. So I withdraw that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goldspink. Thank you, James. And now we'll go back to the original motion. And anybody who wishes to speak on the original motion is welcome to do so. Councillor Stowe, do you want me to come to you later, or do you want me to come to you?
I don't mind, Chairman. I mean, I can speak now if you like.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I just feel that we've spoken about a lot of issues about this, but the bottom line is the budget. And if we don't try and do something to get the budget in a suitable position, we're going to have to cut services. Now, I'd like people to tell me what they want us to cut out so we can actually balance the books, because it's okay, and I feel sympathy with the carbon situation, yes, but it's money, it's budget we're talking about, and the budget's been available to everybody ever since the agenda was published back last year. It's a public document and everybody had a chance to read it in its entirety. So there's no excuse really for not knowing what the budget was. That's all I want to say really. Thank you, Chairman.
You're seconding the proposal?
Yes, I am seconding. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor James Fracknell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. It's been very interesting listening to the debates go back and forth. I feel that somewhere in this green waste discussion, there was a real opportunity, really, an opportunity for collaboration, for innovation with our waste management systems. But unfortunately, for a whole heap of reasons, including coronavirus and the unforeseen issues that the council have faced, this opportunity has been missed, and we've really ended up in this sort of no-win situation. You know, we're forced to choose between the lesser of two evils, really. Either we allow something to pass for which there is a definite disappointment and bitterness for many of our residents, or we don't allow it and face even greater cuts to possible frontline services, which our residents rely on so much. I think one thing that we haven't spoken about tonight is on that element of communication, and one of the things that was raised to me by many of my residents was the way the consultation process happened, actually, and that's left quite a bitter taste in the mouth for quite a lot, because it didn't come across to many of the residents as a consultation. It came across as a fait accompli. And in doing so has meant that the opportunity for discussion and debate in their eyes has not necessarily come through as it should have done. I myself, I tried to raise this issue previous actually to the medium-term plan going through last year with overview and scrutiny, and tried to get the issues up there. And unfortunately, constitutionally, I'm aware of the reasons why I couldn't do that. And I understand the process and where we are within the Constitution, but I do feel that whatever the outcome tonight and whatever the results of the vote, I really hope that the way that we can take some learning from this as a council, really hopefully in communication, in understanding how to really work with everyone and to support our residents in that way would be really beneficial. So I think that's all I really need to say on it. But thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Freckenham. Councillor Goldspeak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would just like to respond to the criticism that the Liberal Democrat group has not yet provided an alternative budget. That is true. It is also true that we did see the finance papers which came to the audit and governance committees last year, and we have been aware of the medium-term financial plan. However, we were hoping to have a proper finance and budget briefing from our finance officer, and that should have taken place early this year, which would have enabled us to put forward some alternative proposals. However, because of COVID and other difficulties, our budget briefings have been postponed. And I have refrained from phoning or emailing our Chief Finance Officer at this difficult time, because I know he's been extremely busy, and so have other officers. So I have refrained from asking that we could urgently have discussions or budget briefings. I've left it to him to give us the alternative dates, and we're hoping very soon to have a proper full budget briefing, and then we will produce an alternative budget. Thank you. Thank you,
Councillor Goldspeak. Councillor McAndrew, as the proposer of this, do you want to sum up?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot come out of this evening. Who gets access to what information, how people are involved, etc., etc. And I think it's a thing we've got to take stock of and sort of look at to see how we engage or don't engage with people, the role of overview and scrutiny, etc., etc. And as Councillor Goldspeak said, the coronavirus, and she didn't want to sort of put too much pressure on the sort of Chief Finance Officer. But whilst there's coronavirus going on round about us, we've all got to play a role, and our role is to ensure that we look after the residents of East Hants. I'll take away a few points from this evening, but moving forward, I propose the recommendations to be taken on block, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor McAndrew, and thank you for an interesting discussion. I've got one, Councillor Linda Hazley, one more. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it has been a very interesting discussion, but I think I would just like to thank the officers for the extraordinary amount of work that they have put into producing these papers for us. There has been extensive discussion over all the points that you have raised, and this is the best solution in the current circumstance. And we should commend our officers for the work that they've done. So please, let us recognise that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hazy. And now if we can vote then on page 48, A to E, and if you're in favour of the council's proposal, please use the green tick. If you're against it, the red cross, and if you're abstaining, the blue or yellow hand. Thank you very much. That is carried. And we go on to item 6 now, exclusion of the press and public. Proposing the motion to exclude the press and public as set out in the agenda on page 2, which I can read out to you. To move that under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion on item 7 on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the said act of the following description, in that it includes sensitive commercial information. So I propose that we do that. Can I have a seconder, please? Yes, Councillor Beckett. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Beckett. And can we just vote on that? If you're in favour of that, green tick. If you're against, the red no.
I believe that is carried, I think, yes.
Yes, that's carried, thank you.
Okay, so, a brief pause where we can get the recording and live stream stopped.